He is the CTO and co-founder of Tufin. He led all development efforts during the company's initial fast-paced growth period and is focused on Tufin's product leadership. He is responsible for the company's future vision, product innovation, and market strategy. Here to share with us transforming security policy management, staying agile and secure in the cloud, please welcome CTO and co-founder of Tufin, Mr. Reuven Harrison.
Good morning. Very glad to be here. Just perhaps a couple of words about Tufin. We're a platinum sponsor. Very proud to be a platinum sponsor of M.Tech for this event. We founded the company about 10 years ago, myself and our CEO, Reuven. And we are actually ex-Checkpoint when we started the company. Before that, we worked for Checkpoint in the engineering department. And we realized that Checkpoint is a great firewall, and they have a great management platform, Smart Dashboard for those of you who know it. But actually the users of Checkpoint require much more than what Checkpoint is doing in terms of management. And over the years that evolved to supporting additional firewall vendors like Palo Alto more recently, or Fortinet or Cisco, as well as the different cloud platforms. And what I want to talk about today is what we're doing 10 years later after we started the company. I would like very much to provide information that will be useful for you, not necessarily from a Tufin perspective, but a general outlook about the market and the technology and where it's going. I try to anticipate where the market is going or where the technology is going. That's pretty much my job, trying to anticipate the future. And I'm going to share my thoughts with you, both about what's happened over the past 10 years and where the market is heading in the coming 3 to 5 years. So with that said, just want to make a short comment. If you have any questions during the session, just raise your hand and I'll be happy to discuss. So don't be shy. Okay. So today's reality. Let's start with the enterprise network. What does it look like today? Now, this is a general network. Your network could be a subset of this. It probably is a subset of this. But generalizing what enterprise networks look like, this is what it is. There is traditionally a physical network with switches and routers and load balancers and firewalls and proxies and many other network devices. But it's all switch-based. It's subnet-based. And your security zones are based on switches and subnets. And your segmentation and your security is also based on that architecture. So your firewalls can segment between subnets. Moving forwards, we have the next-gen firewalls that are pretty much doing the same thing, but they can do application control and user control as well, right? So the next-gen firewall is a natural evolution of the previous network firewall. Now, moving forwards, we have a new concept, which is an SDN network. So I'd like just to ask people who are familiar with SDN, who know what SDN is, can you just raise your hand? Okay. So perhaps I should just 1 minute explain the concept of SDN. So SDN is a new technology, software-defined networking, which basically says, let's get rid of all this physical stuff where we have to go into the data center and mount a server and put the cables on it and screwdrivers and stuff like that. Let's replace all that by software. Let's create a network which we can automate through APIs. That's generally the idea of SDN. And we have in the market several examples of SDN. One of them is actually here, Nutanix. I think they're a newcomer to this space. But we also have solutions from VMware, NSX, Cisco ACI, OpenStack, which is the open source flavor of SDN. And moving forwards, all networks will have SDN parts in them. Why? Because it's easier to manage. It's easier to manage a network which is automated than a network which is not automated. So SDN provides the automation advantages, but it also provides another very important advantage from security perspective. It has a hypervisor. Okay, the hypervisor is a piece of software that sees all the VMs, all the instances on the network, and also all the networking between them. And this software can actually provide segmentation between VMs. So we don't need to rely on subnets anymore. We can go down to a higher granularity and segment between virtual machines. And that's called microsegmentation. So if you look at the marketing materials from VMware or Cisco, they're all talking about microsegmentation today. And that's probably the future. So segmentation which is more fine-grained than you have today. And moving on, we have the public cloud, right? So I know here people are starting to use Microsoft Azure or perhaps AWS, Amazon Web Services. And in the future, we'll have more and more public cloud. Why is public cloud interesting? I always like to give this example. So 200 years ago, everyone had a well in their garden. If you needed water, you dig a hole, and you put a bucket in the hole, and you get the water, right? So that's a major investment to get water. Today, you open the tap. The cloud is the same. You open the tap, and you get compute, right? That's the cloud, right? It's much easier. It's much simpler. And because economy of scale, it will be much cheaper as well. But by the way, the public cloud is also fully automated. It's SDN. It's software-defined networking because you manage everything through APIs. So that's a third different type of platform. And the future network will have all of these different platforms in it, okay? Side by side. Why? Because it's very difficult to replace and rip out existing infrastructure. So existing infrastructure will remain. But side by side, you will have the more advanced infrastructure. Also because mergers and acquisitions, we see that very often in a larger enterprise. One enterprise acquires another enterprise. One is using Palo Alto, the other is using Checkpoint. Now you have two technologies, right? So the future network will also be multi-vendor. Like it already is, it will be even more multi-vendor. Now, technically, that's all very interesting, but let's think about IT in general. What is IT? IT is not a goal. IT is only a way to achieve business, right? Whatever the business is, whether it's a bank or an insurance company or a hospital or an energy company, the IT is only serving whatever the organization is trying to do in terms of business and functionality. And that business is usually based on applications. Applications that provide services to customers, like a portal. Applications that do trading for banks. Applications that manage the networks or the equipment that produces energy in a large energy company, right? So these applications are the ultimate goal of IT. IT is not the ultimate goal. It's providing services for business. And these applications in the future will be distributed across all of these different types of networks. Okay. Let's move on. So that was from a technology perspective, and now let's talk about a process perspective. And this is something hugely important because what I've seen in my 10 years of experience in this business is that ourselves, the technology people, are very focused on technology, right? We think technology is the best thing in the world because we like it, right? But in fact, I've seen that there is often a tendency to overlook the business process. And if you acquire a tool which is not part of a business process, most likely the tool will not be successful as part of the business strategy, as part of the IT strategy. It has to be embedded in the business process to be efficient. And we have a tendency to overlook that. But I wanted to show you the process which involves a firewall policy change. Okay? And you see how complicated it is. It starts from the two white boxes, either a new application that's being deployed for business, or a modified application, or somebody who needs access to an application. Let's say Joe needs access to the portal to order new parts for his manufacturing line, right? So he submits an access request. Where does he submit that? I don't know. Whatever system the company is using, right? It could be a web-based portal. It could be ServiceNow. It could be BMC Remedy. It could be anything. It could be email, right? It could be just an email or a Word document. After that, the access request goes for approvals. Usually there's some kind of business approval. The engineering department creates an architecture for the solution or for the modification. Then it goes to the risk and the security guys. They look at it. They say, it's okay, it's not okay. This is secure. This is in line with our policies, or this is insecure, whatever. They will look at the services. They will look at the context from a security perspective. And at the end of the day, they will approve it or reject it. Then it goes to operations. And the operations guys implement the changes as designed. They will open new rules on the firewalls. They will create network objects. They may need to add some routes, right? They may need to deploy some servers. But specifically for the firewall guys, it will be modifying the firewall policies and pushing them out. Sometimes in a change window, sometimes not in a change window. Depends on the organization. And then the firewall is there. The policy is there. The application is working, hopefully. If not, we have to go back and check why it's not working. But if it's working, it will be there until something happens. And what happens usually is the application changes or it goes away. And then you end up with a rule which is allowing a flow on your network which is not needed by the business. And that has two outcomes. One is you will fail the audit. Because if you look at all of the main regulatory compliance frameworks like PCI DSS or NERC or HIPAA or all of them, basically they come down to one thing. Every flow on the network must be justified by business. If there is a flow which is not justified, that will fail the audit. And that's really an interpretation of the very fundamental principle of security, which is very simple. This is one rule. If you follow this rule, you will be secure. That's the rule of least privilege. Never grant access that actually isn't needed. Right? So if you don't need access to this room, you should not have the key to this room. That's the principle of least privilege. And the firewalls need to follow the same rule. They should not have rules or flows that are not needed for business. So you will fail the audit, and you will fix it. You will remove the rule. Often removing that rule will break some other application because rules may serve more than one application. In which case, you will have to go back and create another rule which replaces it. So it's a long story. The process is very complex. And as you can see, the process also spans multiple business units. Right? The engineering, the risk, the security, the operations, the applications. A lot of communications between different teams that don't speak the same language. Right? The application guys will request their change in a language which is not technical. They don't know IPs, they don't know firewalls, they don't know web proxies or routers. So they will make a request which is very often vague and can be interpreted in different ways, which will cause wasted time because you will implement something which is not what they meant. Okay, so the process is very difficult. And what we're suggesting here is automation. Automation as a solution. Automation and moving forwards even orchestration. A bigger word which includes automation but goes a little bit further. And what I'm saying, try to be a little bit provocative here, is if you're not automating now, you're late. Because your competitors will be automating. So we see automation more and more. If we look at the extreme, companies like Airbnb or Uber, right? They're based on cloud. They're fully automated. There is no manual operations. If we look at the other side of the spectrum, financial services like the traditional banks, they're 100% manual, right? So we need to find the right balance, and we all need to start moving towards automation. Now, from many discussions that I've had with large organizations over the past 10 years, there are typically 5 reasons why people are afraid to automate. Okay? Why they're concerned about automation. And I want to touch each one of these 5 objections. I'm sure you will agree with some of these objections, and then I want to try and answer them. Why perhaps these objections are not essential. So let's start with the first objection, which I hear very often. My process, my network is very special. My network is very complicated and very special. And I'm not sure your product is mature enough, or the products on the market, to deal with my special networking. So let's see. I want to overrule this objection, and I want to say the following. First of all, there are hundreds of enterprises who are already automating. I'm not talking about cloud organizations. I'm talking about the traditional businesses. Hundreds of large enterprises are already automating their networks. This is an example of a large financial institution in the US which has hundreds of changes every day. They have a network with 2,000 routers and hundreds of firewalls, multi-vendor firewalls, by the way, including Checkpoint and Palo Alto and a few others. They're also deploying OpenStack, and they're doing full automation with Tufin today. So I'm saying if they can do it, probably you can do it too. Okay? Each network is special, that's true. But Tufin has enough capacity in terms of technology to support most enterprise networks. And if you have something very unique which is not supported out of the box, we can probably build a solution for you. Okay. The second objection that I hear a lot is it's too complicated. I've been doing this for many years. I know my people, and I can decide whether a change is secure or insecure based on my knowledge. I've heard this from a lot of users who will not trust the system to do what they've been doing for years. Let's see why this objection is not necessarily the truth. First of all, I want to say that making decisions based on personal knowledge may be good, but it doesn't scale. Right? You can review up to a dozen changes a day, or maybe 20 changes a day. But most likely what you're doing is you're just looking at the person who requested it and just trusting it based on your knowledge with that person. Right? You may even slightly look at the business requirement, but you definitely don't see the full picture. It's too complicated for a human being. So what most security managers do, they receive these change requests, they will look at one out of 10 or 1 out of 5 and say, this looks okay, or this guy, I know him, he's okay, he's trustworthy, so I'll prove it. They're basically doing a statistical kind of thing. They're not really reviewing every change because it's beyond their capacity. Tufin Orchestration Suite can actually model your entire network, okay, with firewalls and cloud platforms and load balancers and routers, all the technologies you see here. And it can actually look at every request and do an analytical-based decision of whether the change is right or not. So it won't miss things that are typically missed by a human being. This example here is 3 retailers, actually very large, 2 very large fashion chains, and the third one, which is a supermarket chain in Europe. And they're doing automation with a very complex network that includes technologies such as MPLS and NAT and VPN. It's a retail chain, so they have a lot of small firewalls across their network, but also a central, very complex network with the MPLS infrastructure. Okay, so moving on to objection number 3. We cannot trust an automated system to make security changes. And I think this should have been maybe the first objection on my list. It's about trust. How can I trust a system to make automated decisions about security? Because security is all about control. And I want to control it, right? If I don't control it, if a system is controlling it, then it's probably not secure. That's the logic that people have, the intuitive logic, which is not necessarily correct. What we've done here is we've built a security policy which is platform agnostic. It supports every type of firewall and SDN platform and cloud platform out there. And this can actually be used to check every change. So every change that comes into the queue will be checked against this. And if it doesn't comply with this policy, we can automatically reject it. Okay? The system will actually review every change and reject it if it's not fully compliant. And here we have, as an example, a very large energy company in France who is using Tufin to automate all of their changes with a unified security policy, as we call this, but also from an application layer. So you may have heard of Secure App. Secure App is our solution which will actually take all of the network connectivity and put it in a business context, in business application context, so that the people who are driving changes are not the IT people, they're the business owners. So it allows people who are not technical to define their connectivity requirements, and then for us to automate the changes. And that's the ultimate way of controlling firewall policies. You don't want to control firewall policies. You want to control business. Firewall policies only serve the business, right? They need to be secure, they need to be compliant. But they're just a means, they're not the actual goal. Okay, objection number 4. How does this affect your jobs, right? Because a lot of the people here are responsible for security or for operations or for a lot of the other functions in that complicated workflow that I showed a few minutes ago. So, let's see. The good news is that, well, maybe just before the good news, automation is happening everywhere, right? It's not something that we can stop or delay or avoid. Automation will happen. So there's like the automated cars, the cars that will drive themselves. That's happening big time. And people who are, whose job today is driving a car or a truck might be out of a job in the future, right? That's just going to happen anyway, so we need to accept that. The same is happening with networks and security. A lot of the manual work that we were doing in the last 15 years is going to be automated. Right? That's going to happen. Luckily, the good news is that there is a very high demand for security professionals. So if you have knowledge in security and you've been doing it for years, there will be a lot of demand for you. You just need to move away from the stuff that it can be automated and will be automated to the more advanced stuff that's probably the future of security, right? There's a lot of tasks in security that will not be automated. And these are the tasks you should be focusing on. And by the way, another recommendation, if you, as a security professional, have interest in programming or scripting, I recommend very much to pick up even a basic scripting language, something like Bash or Python or Perl. Just learn the basics. Don't be afraid. It's not so complicated. And it will enable you to take part in the future networking and security, which will be very much based on this type of activity, on programming and scripting. So open up your browser, go to Google, and type Perl tutorial or Python tutorial for beginners, and take the first step and call an API, because tomorrow you will have APIs on Checkpoint R80, or you have already APIs on Palo Alto, and you can call these APIs, okay? And you will want to call it. Okay, last objection. We're too busy, right? This is the chicken and the egg objection. We're too busy. Why are we too busy? Because we're not automating. So basically, if you start to automate, you will be less busy. But you don't have time because you're not automating. So at some point you will need to do it. This is the right time to do it. Stop what you're doing right now. Make the right decision, start to automate, and move forwards with everything that's happening today in IT, the big revolution. The last example here is a major European retailer that has hundreds of checkpoint firewalls in a provider one deployment. And their change cycle is 3 weeks. And the CEO of the company, this is a very large company, it's the 4th largest retailer in the world. The CEO of the company went to the head of IT and told him, if you don't speed up your change cycle, I'm going to get rid of you and replace all of IT by a cloud. Now, I don't think that's a valid threat. I don't think you can actually do that. But the message is IT needs to accelerate. IT needs to work faster. So they're selecting a solution now, and they will go into production mid-2016, very aggressive time frame, but they have to do it. And it's better to do it before the CEO requests it. Okay, so that was regarding automation of security policies. Now, a few more slides. I want to speak about what's coming in the future, okay? This is all happening already right now. This is coming. Any questions so far? SDN, OpenStack, API, scripts, automation. Okay, fine. So this is what we see in terms of security. So you want to be very agile. You want to move very fast as a business. You want to make changes in minutes or in seconds, not in days and weeks. But you also need to maintain security with all these changes and compliance, right? How do you do that? How do you combine agility with compliance? If you look at the traditional IT, everything was very slow, but you had the controls in place to be secure and compliant, at least on paper, right? Maybe not in reality, but at least you had the checkpoints there. If you look at the other extreme, the cloud, everything is happening very rapidly and there's no control whatsoever. I like to give the example of a service in AWS, which is called CloudFormation, which you should look at. CloudFormation is a service in AWS which enables you to describe an entire data center or a small part of a data center using a JSON script. And with one API call or one button click, you can deploy an entire data center from this JSON file. Okay? So it's a description of a data center which can be deployed automatically. And the interesting thing is that the whole data center can be deployed in minutes and also decommissioned in minutes without the security people even knowing about it. So a whole data center can be deployed and decommissioned, and you, the security people, won't even know that it happened, which is very interesting because it basically means that your traditional control is no longer there. The firewall guys are the most hated people in the organization. Why? Because they're not very senior, but they can stop any business activity by not opening the firewall, right? So that's traditionally true. In the cloud, that's not true anymore. The cloud is operated by developers who are bypassing the firewall guys completely. So you want to get your control back, not because you want to be the most hated guy in the organization, but because you want to be secure and compliant. And you want to do it without disrupting business. So let's see. In cloud and SDN, which cloud is a general name for public cloud, which is Amazon or Microsoft Azure, or private cloud, which is VMware or Cisco ACI or OpenStack or Nutanix, which is here today, and a few others. We have heterogeneous networks, as I mentioned already. Some of them in the old architecture will take days to implement, and others in the cloud will be automated very rapidly. But we want to gain control. We want to be able to see what these developers in the cloud are doing. We want to manage compliance. We want to make sure that they're deploying secure services, etc. How do we do that? We want to be able to give you one view across all of your networks, or you want to be able to have one view across all of your networks and all of your technologies, which is platform agnostic, platform independent, which can look across your checkpoints and your Palo Altos and your Fortinets and your VMware NSX and your Ciscos and your AWS and your Azure. One picture end to end, right? And from this console, you want to be able to manage security. We've just released our latest major release. So Tufin has 4 major releases every year, one every quarter. So R16.1 is the first major release in 2016. And in this release, we've created a new kind of console, which we call the application modeling or the secure app application connectivity map. So here we can take flow logs. We can see the flows that are coming from a cloud platform. And we can discover the connections between the servers. We can show you them on a graphical map. And then we allow you to build a model of the application. So immediately you know what the developers have deployed on the cloud platform. You can gain visibility. You can check compliance. You can check security for this. And you can create a documentation for this in Secure App, which will serve for deploying all the changes, not only in the specific cloud platform, but also across your perimeter firewalls and your data center firewalls and so forth. So this is what we call application modeling, and it's a new feature in R16.1. Okay, this is actually a quote from an article that was on techtarget.com a few months ago, and I think it's a very good summary of what I've been saying so far. So businesses are moving to the cloud, whether it's private cloud or public cloud, and they want to connect their private cloud to the public cloud. They want to have one integrated picture across all of these clouds. They want to be able to see one cohesive network for all their applications so that they can control it both from a business perspective and from a security perspective. Okay. So, last slide, summary. Tufin enables you to be agile and secure. And even without Tufin, forget about Tufin for a moment, you want to be agile and secure. You want to move faster, but you want to do it with security. We enable you to get visibility across the entire heterogeneous network. We enable you to reduce the attack surface, basically to reduce flows that don't need to be there, and to ensure compliance. And we enable you to achieve agility through changes that can happen in minutes instead of days. So thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, so I guess everything I said was perfectly clear. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good event.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reuven Harrison from Tufin.